I will talk about activity monitoring, which means talking about motion sensing and door window sensing. But first, I'd like to say a few words about monitoring in general. So that would include activity monitoring, but also wellness monitoring, things like vital signs and medication as well. And so I think there are a few things that can be said about monitoring in general that would be helpful for us on our path to gain mastery with this technology powered by GrandCare. And so the first thing I'll mention about monitoring in general is that the person on one end is the member themselves, but then on the other end, the person that is doing the monitoring is yourself or someone from the provider agency, somebody who cares about the member, somebody who's serving the individual in question. And so the purpose of this monitoring, any type of monitoring, activity monitoring, wellness monitoring, is to provide care, to provide service to help that person. And that's helpful to remember because at times, perhaps the individual themselves, the member, when they hear the word monitoring, that can conjure up some negative connotations. For instance, some organizations may steer clear of using the word monitoring because it might instill images of somebody who is perhaps with malicious intent monitoring an individual unwantedly and perhaps even taking secret information from that person. And that could not be further from the truth. The camera in particular, which tends to be very often a point of contention, that camera, the only camera in the GrandCare ecosystem, is the one that's on the touchscreen. And that camera is only turned on during a video call. And a video call is only initiated by the member, especially in the case where the organization as a whole has decided to disable the automatic answering or the auto answer for video calls. In that situation, the member has 100% complete control over the camera when it turns on and when it turns off. It turns on when they answer the video call, and then it turns off when that video call is finished. And if they ignore a video call that's incoming, a request for a video call, that camera never turns on. And outside of the video call, that camera is never, ever turned on. The only situation is during a video call. So just to make a special note about that, since we just talked about video calls and this is about monitoring. And in general, when we talk about monitoring in this sense of the GrandCare sense, we're talking about viewing data. This is data that would be available in a portal or authorized users of the portal, like yourself, so that it could include things like graphs or the numbers themselves. And since in many cases, the people monitoring aren't interested in all of the loads and loads of data that are being collected by sensors and devices, they will set rules for themselves to pluck out specific instances that they're interested in. And they'll, in other words, create rules and receive alerts when those rules are triggered. And so part of what we will go over in this monitoring in general discussion is the rules engine and how that works, because that will come into play, not just for activity monitoring, but for any kind of monitoring, wellness monitoring, push button monitoring, etc. And so this is what we're referring to primarily when we're looking at monitoring. And so GrandCare has a powerful rules engine. It's one of the nicest things about this technology. And in general, what is a rule? A rule is an if and a then. And so The if is the condition that you're interested in. If you're collecting data, then you're only interested in specific conditions most of the time. And the then is the action that will be taken if that condition is met. And that action, there's a variety of actions as well that can be taken. And the action is taken because you want to be informed, for example, about this event or this condition being met. And from that notification or alert, then you can take whatever action you desire according to your organization's policies, etc. And so this is just an example of one kind of rule. It's a motion rule where you can select a condition. What is it that you're looking for? In this case, it's motion in the evening in the kitchen every day. And then afterwards, the rule wizard will ask you, okay, if that condition is met, then what do you want to do? And this is one of the things that you can do. You can send a text message to everyone that is a caregiver for this particular account for this touchscreen. And so before we talk about specific conditions, because the conditions are going to be different depending on what kind of sensors and devices you have installed for a particular member, we'll first talk about the second part, which is the action. What kinds of actions are available for staff or for the touchscreen in some cases? And so the first action that's available in response to a condition being triggered is that an email can be sent. So you see the example there on the left where in the wizard, the decision that has been taken is that if any medication is not acknowledged as being taken, so that means it's either ignored or it's been rejected deliberately, then an email is going to be sent to everyone that's listed as a caregiver. And that's what you see as an example there on the right-hand side is that kind of email. It just goes into your inbox and you could click and it'll take you straight to the account that's in the portal. And so that's how an email action looks. Another type of action that can be executed in response to a condition is a phone call. And that call could go to a phone number. As you see there on the left-hand side, it's going to a specific phone number of somebody who is authorized to be a caregiver or someone to receive notifications. And then that phone call will show up on your smartphone, for example, in this example. And by default, it will be listed in the caller ID as GrandCare notification system. But you can change that to whatever you want it to say in your directory for your phone. And then when you pick up that phone call, then it's going to say that this is a message from the GrandCare notification system, and it's going to say for which account it's regarding, and then it's going to deliver the essence of the message, which in this case is that the on-screen button "Call Me" was pressed by the member at the touchscreen. And then it'll give you three options. As someone who's received this phone call, you can acknowledge that you've gotten this notification. You could repeat the notification if it was too quick or if you wanted to you missed some detail of it. Or you could press 3 for more information, which gives you some time and system ID and things like that. And if you don't do any of those things, the call can end, but then it would try again another time. So will the phone calls and text messages come from the 262? And so the way it's currently set up is, yes, there's a specific 262 number that's being used. And so you can identify that from your call log. But a specific aside here that I'll mention, there is also an option to define a call list. So that's part of the phone call action. It's not just one number that's being called, but there's an order of calls. Without getting into it too much, I'll just show here an example of how that looks, how you can set it up, the order, what numbers you can include in it. You can give the call list a name, and then this would show up as an option in the rules engine for receiving calls. Another action that, as you can imagine, can be taken would be to receive a text message to a phone number that you provided as a user. And so that text message would come by default from the GrandCare notification system, and it would tell you briefly which account was involved and what the condition was that was triggered. In this case, a call me button was the condition. It was it being pressed on the touchscreen. Interestingly, if you have a smart switch set up, and without getting too much depth right now into how to set that up, you can set up a smart switch so that it turns on and off according to certain conditions. And if you connect that smart switch to a lamp or some kind of light fixture, then you're in essence controlling a light. And so if there's a specific condition that's triggered, one of the options you would have in that case is to turn on that light. That could be useful, for instance, if you are interested in providing light at a specific time of the day where the member perhaps may or may not have turned on the light or had the awareness to do it, you could do it for them. Yet another action that could be taken in response to a condition is that a message could be sent to the screen. And so this would be part of the slideshow. And in this case, it's being sent to the screen every minute, of course, for 1 minute. So it shows up there for 1 minute and then disappears. These are for simple applications. In this case, if the condition was that the outside temperature was greater than 60 Fahrenheit and the message there to drink water was posted on the screen. And slightly different, but also on the touchscreen. In this case, you could also have an acknowledgement message on the screen, which is not just something that pops up on the slideshow and disappears after some time, but is something that has its own window and could be acknowledged, as you see there in the example. So that's one action. And the difference here is, again, it's required to be acknowledged, but then it could also be read with the text-to-speech button on the top right-hand corner. And it could also be accompanied by a tone. And finally, if you don't want anything to happen on the touchscreen or on anyone's phone or email, then what you can do is you could create an internal dashboard notification. And when that condition is met, then the dashboard of a particular person who is involved in the care of this account will receive, as you see there, an alert in the alerts section. And a certain number will pop up there. There's one alert. And we'll go through an example of this in a short while, because I'll be briefly mentioning here that the rules, and in particular the conditions, can have a specific severity, the actions can have a specific severity associated with them. And so this is determined by the organization. GrandCare doesn't impose any particular methodology for the colors or the levels and gradations. It's up to each organization to use this as they please. And when you create these rules, they will be highlighted with a specific color when you see them on a list of rules based on this severity level. That's what makes the difference with the severity rules. It's a special highlight. However, I will mention, in addition to this special highlight, for the highest severity, which is critical, there's something very special that happens, which is something called a managed alert is created for critical or red severity level alerts. And so if you set severity 4, what you're setting up is a managed alert. And so when that condition is met, then a sound will chime loudly in the portal. In this particular case, the alert, the managed alert, was for an action button being pressed in Jen's bedroom touchscreen. And so that button was pressed, and all of a sudden in the portal of the caregiver, then this alert chimes. And then at the same time, that internal dashboard alert was set up. And so you have that pink number 1 there on the left-hand side. You can click it and you can see a list of alerts. And in addition to seeing a list of all the alerts, you can filter, as shown here in the middle, for any managed alert, and in particular, any managed alert that hasn't been checked yet. So we'll get into shortly why the word checking is mentioned here. And so this is a helpful filter if you want to just look at unchecked managed alerts. Managed alerts have a certain seriousness to them. And so the seriousness, with it comes some required actions. So in addition to hearing the loud chime and receiving that notification in the corner, it appears on a list of unchecked managed alerts. And then when you click on that unchecked managed alert, then you as the user of the portal have the option to claim that alert, to make it your own. And when you click on it, then that pop-up on the right shows up. And in essence, you're saying that I would like to be responsible for following this alert towards its resolution. And you can go ahead and click Claim Alert. After you claim the alert, then 2 new options pop up. For this managed alert, you can add a note to it, or you can resolve it. And so if you add a note to it, you can include information that you think might be useful for people who are reading about this managed alert. This could be management or just other people, other staff, things that would be helpful to know about this, what happened in this particular alert. This is up to you if you want to use this note feature, but it's there. And then in addition to the requirement for a managed alert to be claimed, then it also has the need to be resolved. So when you click Resolve Alert, then it'll pop up and ask you for some details to fill out about how this was resolved. It's up to your organization how you want to use this particular functionality as well. And so that's monitoring in general. We'll get into activity monitoring. And so now we're interested in providing care and service for a member as regards to activity-related concerns. What do we mean by that? So we're going to go through the different kinds of scenarios where examples of where this kind of activity monitoring technology might be useful. But first, I'd like to share what's possible with the technology. And so the motion sensors are one activity device that can be used with GrandCare technology. And there are specific motion sensors that our development team has integrated with the GrandCare technology, and we provide that list to organizations. And so one of those examples is shown there. That particular motion sensor could be installed at a wall, or it could be placed on a shelf. Sometimes it's even taped to the leg of a bed. And so there are many ways to fasten, attach, locate, place this motion sensor depending on the application that you want. And at some point, I would like to give anyone who's interested in technology or deployment of these motion sensors a specific power hour to get into those kinds of details. And then we look at conditions. What kinds of conditions? Because we just looked at the various actions like email, call, text. Now we get into conditions, and in particular, what kinds of conditions can we check for if we install a motion sensor at a location? So you'll see the various varieties here. They're relatively straightforward. The first few, any motion will just look for any kind of movement that's triggered. No motion is if it doesn't see anything, then that could be a rule that you set, if the negative side of it. Next motion is most often used for testing. It just looks for one motion and then it disables the rule. So once that next motion has been triggered, then the rule is no longer operable. Excessive motion is when a motion sensor is in a particular location and it's detecting motion there over a specific period of time. And if it's detecting motion for a certain percentage of time, in this case, 80%, then this condition is triggered. And so that is useful, for instance, if somebody might be in a room and like a bathroom, and they're in there for a certain period of time longer than you would consider normal, then perhaps there's a rule that could be triggered there with a corresponding action. And wandering motion is a very, very special case that requires 3 motion sensors. And for those motion sensors to be triggered one after another, over a certain period of time given by a percentage algorithm. And in some cases, that can help people to determine if there's a seizure. That's the most common case that I've heard that one being used for. After you have selected this type of motion condition, then you could further refine the condition that you're interested in. So not only do you have the chance to pick which detector you're interested in this case, this rule isn't interested in any specific detector. It's just going to choose any detector in the house, and you have the motion sensors detector sensor that's used in an interchangeable way. And then you can select what time frame, what time period you would like to check for that particular rule. Maybe you only want it in the evening or only in the afternoon or in the morning. And so here's where you can go from X AM to X PM, so on and so forth. And then you can decide, this is more of a technical thing, how often you want to apply that rule. Because, of course, if you're looking for a condition and you check every 5 minutes, you're going to get more alerts, a lot of alerts, perhaps too many alerts. And so you might want to bump up this number so that you're not as sensitive in triggering that text message or phone call to staff members. And finally, you can select the days on which you'd like to check. If you want to just check on the weekends or on a particular weekdays, here's where you can define it. And in addition to motion sensors, you can install door/window sensors. These sensors can be used on a door or a window, very often to detect opens and closes. Unlike the motion sensors, which are generally one piece, door/window sensors are 2 pieces. And one piece is the magnet, the little piece, and the bigger piece is the one that detects the magnet's presence and very often contains the circuitry to transmit the signal. And so when the door is opened, the 2 pieces separate and the magnet is no longer detected. And that's how it can detect opens and closes. When the door is closed, the magnet is once again within range of the magnet detector, and that detects it as a closed situation. And so you could install this at a door or a window. And there's a point that can be made here that there are not just doors where people walk through, but even doors like a door for a refrigerator or a door for a medicine cabinet. And then there you have an example of a window that's an open shut window where you could install the 2 pieces, one piece on the moving part and one piece on the fixed part. And you can detect conditions related to opens and closes. And so this one is more straightforward. And if it's open, then those two, the magnet and the sensor, are separated, not opened. That means that they're together. Next opened is similar to the next motion, where it detects the open one time and then disables the rule so that the rule doesn't keep triggering afterward. So that's, for example, if you just wanted to see if the person has walked through the door one time and then get that alert and not worry about it anymore in the morning, then that's an example of when you might set. Just know that the rule gets disabled after that. And left open isn't open for a certain duration. You could get a condition triggered for that as well and receive an action, an alert, or a notification. The data that one can view once a sensor is installed, for instance, a motion sensor. Can you see here when you go into the accounts page for a particular touchscreen, you can click on the data tab. And then from this data tab, you can see all sorts of data with this pull down menu, one of which is the motion graph. And so it'll show you there when it's been open or closed. And an alternate way of viewing motion data is through the care menu. If you follow this set of steps here, touching the activity app and then clicking on I have it there at the icon, I'm sorry, that should be with the graph, clicking on the graph there. And if you click on the graph, then you can see the motion for a particular sensor. So no motion is just a regular blue straight line here that says none. And then if the motion was happening for the entire 15-minute period, then it'll be completely 100% here. But if it was just happening for part of that 15-minute period, then it'll be a shorter height. And so that's how you can quickly see motion. Similarly, with door, window, and closing data, you could do the same thing. Go to the account data page and select, instead of motion graph, go to door sensors and see basic information like that. And in general, for data of both varieties, motion and door, you can go into that. And when you click on reports, instead of doing video call log like we did, you can generate a report on motion and door data here at the reports page, similar to what we did for video call log last time. Instead, select activity stream so you can see motion and door data instead. Data, if you just want to see a summary of all activity devices and what they're doing right now, you can select activity summary. The activity summary is just very simple. There's not much to say about it. If you want to see motion and door data as it currently looks for any of the sensors, you could select activity summary. Here.